Welcome back to In Depth with Academia, the podcast where we take a big, robustly nerdy look at research papers making waves in their fields and ask what those waves might mean for you. I'm Richard Price, founder of Academia EDU, and as always, I'll be unwrapping new research in the friendliest, most curiosity-driven way I can, while impressing upon you that I am not here to endorse or debunk, but just to lay out the ideas as neutrally as possible. Today, we're putting on our paleogeography hats and heading to Southeast Asia, specifically Sundaland, and the paper in the spotlight is by Dani Irwanto, titled A Refined Relative Sea Level Curve for Sundaland. The core question this paper tackles is deceptively simple, but wow, totally vital if you care about anything from ancient rivers to human migration routes. The big issue is this: how has the relative sea level shifted across the Sundaland shelf over the last, call it 20 to 500 years? Why does it matter? Because if you want to know, for instance, how prehistoric people or animals got from one chunk of land to another in Southeast Asia, or if you want to reconstruct ancient rivers, or even try to predict how future sea levels might behave, you really need a reliable curve showing exactly when and how the seas rose and fell in this region. But there's a huge challenge. Sundaland, this vast now submerged shelf, just doesn't have the kind of dense, reliable data you'd find in, say, Europe or North America. Most sea level reconstructions rely on indicators, like corals, peat, even mangrove stumps, that tell us where sea level used to be. And those are pretty rare or patchy when you get to Sundaland. So researchers have mostly borrowed or adapted global models, which is fine, but it leaves a lot of question marks for local details. Now, Dani Irwanto's approach is to compile as much reliable offshore data for Sundaland as possible. So, for the methods, he dug into three key sources. There's a super high-resolution sea level reconstruction from Singapore, that's Chua, 2021. There's the gigantic SEAMIS database from Mann and others in 2019. And finally, some Sunda-specific sites from the massive global work by Lambeck et al., 2014. He cleaned these up, filtered out questionable points, things from swampy or problematic spots, and ended up with, I think, 132 decent offshore data points covering the last, 19 to 250 years. Not bad, given how tough this field is. So what did he do with the data? The analysis here is actually pretty clever. He compared the Sundaland specific points to the global mean sea level from Lambeck's reconstruction, then looked at the residual, basically how local sea level differs from the global trend at different points in time. And because you want your model of sea level to line up with the present, can't have your predictions saying the ocean is 2 meters higher than it actually is, yeah? He used something called an anchored quadratic adjustment. That means the fit is forced to zero at the present day, and the curve flexes to best explain the historical deviations. What's so tangible about this? I can just hear the practical questions. So what? The sea went up and down. How much could that possibly impact me in my daily life? Well, for one, understanding these ancient sea levels helps in building accurate maps of ancient environments. If you're an archaeologist wondering where people lived or migrated as land bridges came and went, or if you're planning modern infrastructure and worried about long-term coastal change, knowing these historical sea level positions gives you a crucial before snapshot to compare against today or tomorrow. It's also, and this is maybe stretching it, fascinating for anyone who likes to picture lost worlds. There were times much of the Java Sea was dry land. Wild, right? Okay, digression. Sometimes I catch myself imagining what it would be like if you could hop on a bike and just ride from Singapore to Borneo, right across the sun-dried shelf, dodging ancient rivers, maybe running into a woolly mammoth, or, well, honestly, just some very confused deer. Sorry, back on track. So, Irwanto's main findings, after all this filtering and fitting, are that Sundaland sea level actually tracks the global mean pretty darn closely within about plus or minus 5 meters over 20,000 years. But there's a notable downward blip like 4 meters lower than global around 11,600 years ago. That's significant because it lines up with regional factors. Think things like sediment loading, crustal movements that have local impacts. The Sundaland curve is now a little more regionally precise, especially during those key transitions when land was vanishing into the sea. Oh, and for the oldest chunk, where there's no good local data, he splices in the global curve with a fixed offset, trying to keep everything physically consistent. Does this mean we now have the perfect sea level curve for the region? Nope. The author himself spells out the limitations. The dataset is still sparse, especially for the most ancient times, and relies a lot on filtering and model fitting choices. Plus, more local data could definitely sharpen the curve further, so it's a working tool, but not the final word. Remember, I'm not endorsing Iwanto's solution, just presenting it as thoughtfully as I can. So, why should you care? Because every time you look at a map, especially maps of a changing coastline, be they ancient or modern, you're looking at an argument built out of research like this. Academic papers don't give us eternal truths. They simply sharpen our understanding, add nuance, give us better tools to ask the next question. Maybe you're in coastal management or heritage science, or you're just deeply curious. This curve offers a more nuanced foundation for whatever comes next. That's all for today's episode of In Depth with Academia. As always, I'm Richard Price, staying neutral, learning alongside you, reminding you that academic research is just one more lens for exploring this amazing, complex world. See you next time.